Let's see how we mix our syrup. So we buy high fructose 55. It's fairly dense, and a lot of people just feed it straight that way. What we do is we order a semi-load and we get it delivered to our 6,000 gallon tank by a semi. It is cheaper that way, and we used to go we used to go to Lodi. That's where we purchase them from Sweetener Products. We used to go down and get about 6 totes, um, and then we'd bring them back. We would go get them ourselves, and we'd bring them back, unload them, and then we'd mix them up. And we started actually buying it so much that I had to start going every week to getting it. So we ended up just buying a tank. There are different types of tanks. They're color coordinated. So the like a black tank that you might see at Tractor Supply, they're actually a really thin wall. They're designed for water. Syrup is much thicker, so this tank is actually quite thick. It's about half inch to 3/4 inch thick. I'm not really sure about that, but they're actually rated by how heavy the liquid you're putting into. And then they also make even thicker tanks. They're blue tanks, so they're color coordinated. That way you know what you're putting into it. So they can actually handle the weight of it, because it actually physically pushes on the tank on the outside, so you don't want it to burst. We were going to make a pad, a concrete pad for it. However, you have to make them quite thick, because if the concrete splits, it'll actually crack the tank. You're better off with what we did for this one, because this is not our permanent location for these. We actually want to move them to the new building. We actually poured sand. So this is sitting about a foot of sand. And what we did was we poured about 4 inches of sand, and then we bought a compactor, or like a vibrating compactor, and we vibrated it all down. Then we poured another about 4 inches of sand and we vibrated it down. And then we built it up about a foot, maybe a foot and a half deep. It's aligned to keep the sand from going away. We put some old logs that we had. I think they're 8x12s or 8x20s, something like that. It was just old logs that we had, and we just put them together, and we just kind of make a channel, or a trough, if you would call it. Okay. I'm still working on the piping on this, but basic idea is that we store solid syrup here, and we keep it here as long as we can. And then when we need it, we go ahead and pour it in this 2,000 gallon tank. We put water in first with a little bit of Clorox into it, just to stabilize it, just to keep it, because we don't wash these all the time. We try to wash them out about once a year, all the hoses. However, just to keep it kind of sanitary, as clean as possible. And that's one of the reasons we actually pick Sweetener Products to use them. We don't use Man Lake, because Sweetener Products makes the syrup we get is food grade, and you get a certified little bottle saying, with a sample saying that it was tested and all that, and it has a number on it. So if you ever have any problem, you can come back to them with that. I mean, we've never had a problem with it, and that's frankly why we use them, because they're food grade. If it's good enough for people, then it's good enough for our bees. And you have to be very careful with it, because if you go cheap with it, most of the time you're feeding all your bees at once, and you don't want to poison all your bees at once, and it's very, very easy to do. Okay, so let's start filling this guy up. So first I'm gonna turn on the water, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of Clorox to this. This is actually a mixer that will introduce Clorox into the flow in water. So it uses a venturi system. This is a venturi system down here, and what it's going to do is going to suck in the Clorox and then put it right into the line. I used to just use a ladder to go up there, but the Clorox bottle itself is pretty big. It's a 5-gallon bottle, and it is pretty strong Clorox. I believe it's around 12%, maybe like 10%. So if you spill it on yourself, it does put holes in your clothing, and walking up the ladder with that, not good. So I purchased this venturi system, so when we're pumping water into it, it'll just suck it right in. All right, let's get going. What we do first is we add water first, and then with Clorox, and then we'll dump the heavy syrup on top of it. That way it's already mixing while we're dumping. If we do it the other way, my big pump, my centrifuge pump, is not going to be able to pick it up and actually properly mix it. It's just too heavy for it. And since it is cold right now, it is about 40 degrees and it's been cold, that syrup is pretty heavy. So usually I can get away with using my centrifuge pump. It doesn't like it, but it takes it. But on these cold days, we actually have to use a positive displacement pump or a gear pump. However, it's much, much slower. The centrifuge pump can pump about 250, 300 gallons a minute. The gear pump is only about, you're lucky if you get 20 gallons a minute. Okay, let's go get the Clorox and put it in. This is the Clorox we use. It's not necessarily cheaper to buy them this way. We actually buy it from an industrial chemical company. But the quantities we need is just more convenient. And the bigger you go, convenience, to save 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there adds up. When you run a business and the more employees you have to figure out a way how to shave time, how to make everything faster or easier. It's usually easier. Like, you have to have systems. So getting Clorox in, you don't have to bring in, like 20 bottles. Like this, I don't want to have to pour 5 bottles when I can just do it with one. When it's the same price, or sometimes it's cheaper. This, I think right now it's about the same price, but I don't have to go out and buy 50 bottles. I only buy 20 and they last a couple months for us. Now, like I said, this stuff is pretty strong, so you have to be really careful when you're adding it. It doesn't spill on you. I have many sweaters that I've ruined. All I want to do is close it. Now coming down to the venturi system. This is the actual venturi system. The idea is water flows and there's a small resistance here, and what happens is it actually creates a suction right here. On this particular unit there's a bypass, so right now the water is flowing around it because it's just easier for it. It's always going to flow in the least resistance. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to close it off, and you'll start to hear how it's trying to create suction right here. So that's the actual suction right now. And what I can do is now I can start adding. And we can see that the Clorox is going to start getting sucked in there. And I can open up a little more. And that water right there is now being chlorinated. Now, because this uses seals, and seals don't really like being with Clorox, it actually starts destroying Clorox. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this open a little bit and start opening up this valve. That way it's actually going to back purge and it's going to push a little bit of water in here. That way I can cheaply wash it. I can probably go get a hose and, spray a little bit of water in there, but this works too, and I don't have to go get an extra stuff. So now that's all water. I'm going to close it off again. Open up this fully. This is just a ball valve right here, and I was going to open it up. It's going to suck it in there. I'm going to do it one more time. Now we don't need anything. We're just gonna let the water flow, and I'm gonna let that guy go up to all the way up to about 1,000 gallons. So here's my 1,000 gallons, and we're gonna add another 1,000 gallons of syrup to it. I used to use this with, fill this with a garden hose. It takes about an hour and a half, actually a little longer, depends on the temperature, because it will actually vary about 15 minutes up or down. And then we installed a 2-inch line here. Now we can pump about 200 gallons, 300 gallons a minute. So it's much faster. But you'll see in a minute that we're gonna have to pump with the gear pump, and that's gonna take forever. While that's filling up, I'm gonna go put this away. Okay, that's it. Okay, now that we have the water, we need to turn on the pump to pump the syrup from the big tank to this tank. Like I said, the centrifuge pump is not going to be able to pull it. I know that for a fact. So we have a gear pump. But before I turn on the gear pump, because it makes a lot of noise, I'm going to show you a quick layout of what this mess looks like. It is a mess because it was first one pump, and then, oh, we need to do this, oh, we need to be able to do that. So I'll give you a quick walk around exactly what it looks like. To start off, so we'll do a journey of what the syrup sees. The semi is going to come into here. You always have to make sure that your semis can have adequate room for them to turn around and park. So the semi comes here. Usually their exhaust, or where they pump from, so they will actually pump it for you. It's preferably to have a 3-inch cam lock available for them. That way it is the easiest way for them to pump for you. They actually do pump themselves. The semis have a gear pump on board, 3-inch, I think it's a 4-inch actually, gear pump, and it'll pump quite quickly. In fact, you actually have to be careful. We always ask them to start off slow and then turn it up after our PVC equalizes the pressure, because it can get actually a thermal shock to it. Usually the syrup is warm when it comes in, so if it's cold, it actually can crack it. But the best way to do it here is to actually have a 3-inch cam lock coupling, male coupling for them. That is the easiest for them to do it. They can step it down to 2-inch, but the availability, how fast they can pump then, is squared. It's to the power, because I think you can pump about 200 to 300 gallons to a 2-inch, and you can pump from a 3-inch. You can pump about 5,000 gallons a minute. It goes up exponentially. So the bigger you go, the easier it is to pump. And you don't want the semi to be hanging around here too long. I get it that if it's like your first one, like, it's not a big deal if you spend an hour, but if you the bigger you go, the semi is always going to show up at the wrong time, and you really don't want him to be there longer than you need to, because time is money, and the bigger you get, the more obvious it is. So build it right the first time. Anyways, coming back here, 3-inch intake, the syrup comes in, it goes through here, and then it comes back, loops around here, comes back to the tank. You don't want rigid lines, so you have to use these flexible lines. These actually have a metal spiral inside them. That way there can be used suction and discharge. And you can see it right there. It says suction discharge. So they actually fill it from the bottom. There is a vent on top. So they will pump it up to about 4,200 gallons. They actually sell it by weight, but it's about 4,200 gallons. It varies. It depends on the semi. So they load it up to 80,000 pounds for the semi, and they'll bring you about 50,000 pounds worth of actual syrup. But it really depends on the semi. Sometimes the semi is a little bit lighter, so they can actually bring you a little bit more. So it'll vary. We got a 6,000 just in case, you know, like we have a little bit left, and he can pump it in there. So from here, I have two choices for me to pump. Once again, the syrup is going to open up and it'll come into here. And then from here, it'll actually go to my centrifuge pump. This is my centrifuge pump. It's a Banjo. I believe it's a 3 horsepower or 2 horsepower. And then it'll suck it up here and it will throw it back and it'll put it right into here. So this just loops around and comes back into here. From here, I can either put it back into this 2,000 gallon tank. I can put it to our 500 gallon tank, this one where we pump the syrup to fill the cans from. Or I have another line that I can pump it to our trailers, into our totes. We have a trailer with totes, and we can just fill it up from here. So we can connect it, and in a couple of minutes we can fill it up. For special occasions, like right now, we have a gear pump. Like I said, these pumps are positive displacement pumps. That means if you do not have a bypass valve, they will pump until they either destroy themselves or they'll burst the line. We're talking, it'll just keep building pressure. It doesn't care. Centrifuge pumps, if you block them, they won't like it, but they can take it. Like they will just build up a certain amount of pressure, and that's it. They won't be able to build up pressure. These pumps, you have to be very careful with them. Usually they have a bypass valve. I don't need a bypass valve because on my output, I don't have a valve. It'll just pump it no matter what. Same thing on the suction. You have to be careful with the suction on them. I probably will put a bypass valve, but right now it is what it is. So on this one, it actually is tapped into that line, so it'll come out from the big tank and it'll get sucked into there. So open up the big valve, little valve, walk over here, and like I said, this is going to take forever. This is going to be probably a 2-hour pump, if not more. And before you ask what kind of cover that is a doghouse cover. Basically, it's made for dogs. Yeah, you can hear it starting to pick up the really heavy stuff because it's settled. I don't heat my syrup, so it gets hard a lot. Like, it's basically solid. But that pump will pump it. And you can see it right there. It's throwing chunks at it. And once it goes on top, we'll mix it out. It'll be fine. But you do need a gear pump at these temperatures. And I don't want to heat that. I'll probably make a solar heater for it, but not right now. You can see the chunks falling. Those are solid. So there's no way the centrifuge pump will be able to pump it. Okay, we got it's full. It's at 2,000. This guy's about 1,200, so we got one more mix in this guy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna turn off the valve and quickly just slightly open the cams. That way we get a little bit of air and it'll suck up the rest of it. I don't want to leave the syrup in the hoses, especially the thick syrup, because it's gonna harden up in the hoses and it's gonna be very difficult to get it out. So, but I gotta do this quickly because this thing is gonna start sucking it up really hard. And then I'll hear a change in it. There it goes. I'm just gonna push it out a little bit, and I'm gonna turn the pump off. Turn the pump off. Close that. Close that. Now, I'm pumping it into this line right here. That is the same line that I have the water running to. Ideally, I would like to push some water through all of the hoses, but for right now, I just have it here. So all of this is still syrup. So I'm gonna just open up the water just for a little bit to pump it through. There we go. That's now that we got that filled, I'm gonna open up the bottom. Make sure that this valve is open, the 3-way's open. That's gonna go in the pump, and then from the pump, it goes into here, and then this is gonna be returned. So we're taking it from the syrup from the bottom, we're just gonna drop it on top. The pump is priming. This hose right here, this is not a suction discharge hose, this is just the discharge hose, so it's soft. And now I'm gonna leave it for about an hour to mix. And that'll mix it it'll pump it about 3 or 4 times over. Well, there you go. That's how we mix our syrup. So we mix it 50-50 with high fructose 55 and with water. Hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe if you want to see some more. If you guys want to see something in particular, leave it in the comment. I'll try to get around to it. Thanks for watching.